and thanks for listening to the Adulting is Easy podcast, where we make adulting easier by making money easier. This is your host, or should I say, guest, Lauren. Get ready for a special episode where I am interviewed by my good friend, Clint. Let's get into it.
All right, Lauren. Thank you for having me on to host you on your show. This is going to be fun. Why don't you tell your listeners what episode are we on? Why did you decide to turn the page and get interviewed? And then we'll dive right into it.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here, Clint. Clint Murphy, my good friend of many years now. Thank you for being here. And this is a little bit of retribution because I interviewed you for, I believe, your
That's right.
50th
That's
show.
right.
So,
I think you were
uh,
my 100th. Yeah.
oh, was it 100? Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
the big one.
Yeah, so for your 100th show, and then this is my 200th show. And so to pay retribution to you, no, I'm just kidding. Because you are such a good interviewer, one of the best that I know, I asked you to come along and interview me, and you graciously accepted. This has been months in the making. So thank you for being here. I was just telling you off mic, I'm a little nervous. Like being on the guest side is very different, and it's really
That's
giving me a
right.
lot of empathy for people that are on this side of my podcast.
Oh, I love that. Okay, so 200th episode. Adulting is easy, but let's not start at adulting. Let's take Lauren back to little Lauren. What I want to explore with you is growing up, what were the money stories that your parents may have been telling you through their actions? What did you learn about money and finances and career as a young Lauren?
I was very blessed with something called curiosity, which I think you can be naturally blessed with that. I think you also can nurture that, maybe minor in
Mm.
it, if you will. But I would say I've always majored in curiosity. And I was very lucky because my parents would nurture that and answer my questions. And a lot of those questions were about money and things like that. Why don't we have this? Can we afford this? Can we buy this? Do we have a payment on this car? Why don't we have payments? What does
Oh,
financing mean? All of the dad, how much do you make? He would tell me, like, when I was like a small child. The one question he didn't answer for me was I asked him if I was ever kidnapped, how much money could he come up with? And he told me 50 bucks. And I think it was probably more than that. But for the most part, he answered all of my questions and my mom too. And what they really the overarching theme that I remember from my childhood is we could afford more than we have, and we are very consciously not doing that. And I think that sort of started, I was left with the
oh,
impression that this
okay.
started when my mom decided to stay home. And her and my dad were making about the same amount of money when I was born. And even though she had two homes and was really ahead of him financially, more than the 2 years older than she is. My dad took a while to get out of school. He really messed around a lot. He didn't, he went to Vanderbilt for a year or two and just partied and had to come home with his tail between his legs and all this different stuff. And she just was kind of like, the turtle trotting along, and he was the hare. He sprinted and then he ended up not being able to complete everything on time. But anyways, they decided for her to stay home. And so I think it started like that. Like I think my dad, they were each making like $40,000 at the time. And this is like 1989 when I was born. And so we always knew that we were foregoing a whole second income that we could have had as a family. And for that reason, there were sacrifices that needed to be made. We knew that weren't going to go out to eat. And if we did, it was like McDonald's. We knew that, we cook at home. No, we don't buy Build-A-Bears because you can get a bear at the thrift store for 50 cents. You don't need a bear that's 25, 30 bucks or whatever, things like that. So we're always these conscious effort to know that we could do more, but we weren't. And then there was this other aspect to it where other people were not doing that. We were very aware of.
Mm. So keeping up with the Joneses was never part of your family's lifestyle.
No, it was very consciously stealth wealth. which of course I don't think was a term back in the 90s when all of this was. But I do recall being 5 years old and realizing we had more than most people, that we were better off than most people. And we were really, especially at that time, still like middle class, maybe slightly more, but just realizing we had this decent house. We had these two okay cars, but I knew we owned them outright cash because I would ask them, like, what because you see those things even when you're 5 years old, you're seeing the percent financing and whatever. And so I knew we had paid cash for these cars, and my parents explained to me that not everybody does that. So I knew all that, and then I knew that if we were able to afford all of that on one salary, we were doing better than most people. And that was the first moment I
Nice.
had it when I was 5. And then I think that makes you, as an already curious child, want to understand, how is this happening? How did we get here?
Lauren, and something else in your childhood that jumps out at me, I believe one of the reasons you started Adulting is Easy was having a younger sister. You wanted to be able to share with her, hey, as you grow, here's some lessons you can have on how to become an adult and live life and different things to think about. What was the age gap between you and your sister? And how did having such a large age gap influence the mission that you ultimately went on?
Yeah, so when I was 13 and my brother was 11, my parents gave birth to my sister. So there's an 11-year gap, but my sister and I are 13 years apart. And that's also the same year my brother started experimenting with drugs at the age of 11. And
Mm.
Clint, I know you have two young sons who I believe are both now older than
Yeah,
11.
16 and 13.
Imagine
Yeah.
years of drug use at that point, which is just kind of crazy to think about. But for many years, my parents and me, I was sort of the first one to figure out because I think I was so literally physically close to it. I was next door to my brother, right, living in the same house. We was he experimenting or was this a problem, right? So the fact that my parents then became very involved in literally saving my brother's life, there was some enabling involved, and there's a lot of like family trauma that goes along with that. But what they were, from their perspective, they're saving their son's life, but they also had this baby. And so I, as the 13-year-old straight A student, was sort of left off on my own a little bit to kind of learn and grow because I just wasn't a problem. I mean, I was kind of a problem, but I was like a down low problem where, yeah, did I drink? Did I smoke weed? Did I go to parties? Yes. Did I also get straight A's in something called the IB program and get all of my work done before I did any of those things and also like have a job and play sports and stuff? Then yes. So I just wasn't a problem for them. And so I've asked my parents about this and they think I was independent, thus they didn't pay too much attention to me. My argument is I became independent because you weren't paying a lot of attention to me. But, you know, at the end of the day, that really influenced who I was. But I also recognized that I had a very unique position. And I used to think of myself as like not just a big sister, but a really big sister. And I also recognized that my parents were not in the same position to answer my curiosity questions and take the time to be as present with my sister as they probably were with me and my brother when we were younger because of what was going on with my brother. And, you know, just a small example of that, not money related, but I came home from college and my sister was still on training wheels. And I had taught myself to ride a bike without training wheels when I was like 5. She was like 8. I was like, it's time. So I called her up and I was like, hey, I'm coming home this weekend. And when I leave, you're going to be able to ride a bike on 2 wheels. And that's what me and her did that weekend. And so, much like I was there when she said her first words, took her first steps, swallowed her first solid food, with all of these things I remember vividly, taught her to tie her shoes, taught her to ride a bike. I did all these things with her. Of course, I was also going to teach her about money and
Mhm.
generally adulting. But adulting is very broad. I mean, if you look adulting up online, it's everything from like making your own dentist appointments to
Yeah.
sewing on a button, hemming your pants when the hem falls out or whatever. I really took it to be specifically about money because if you get your money right, if you're not worried about how are you going to buy the tire now that you've got a flat tire, how am I going to buy these pants? How am I going to buy this in my next meal? How am I going to do all this? If you're not worried about those, how am I going to pay for this dentist? If you're not worried about all of those things, it makes life a lot easier. And so that's why I created Adulting is Easy, but it really started with the avatar for my content, which started written and then in 2019 transitioned to verbal through the podcast or audio, was her as the avatar. Over time, she's gotten older. Obviously, she's almost 22 years old now. She was 16 when I started doing this. It's a little bit morphed to the mid 20s to 30-year-old because honestly, that's about where her knowledge is at this point. She's
Mm,
22 years old, but she definitely knows a lot more. And you would love this, Clint, but she loves, as you know, loves reading. She's like, oh, we're on Goodreads, and she's like, oh, I see you read The Tipping Point. I found The Tipping Point at the thrift store. I'm reading it now. She
nice.
read Atomic Habits. She's read, a bunch of the different, like obviously I had her read Richest Man in Babylon and some of those, and so she has sort of surpassed her age group in this knowledge, and she invests in a brokerage account, $150 a month into the S&P 500 and does just some little things. So she's really ahead of her years. So my avatar has really switched over time to still being her. I still kind of picture her when I'm writing questions for guests, but it is like 25 to 35 probably because she's who she is. And then she wasn't as curious as me with my parents, but I always have been a safe space for her to talk to, I think. And so she's not afraid to ask me dumb questions or call and run something by me. And so that's just the relationship that she and I have. And I take it very seriously. And I was just talking to my mom about this. Like, there have been times in my life with her where I accidentally influenced her, which you probably know this as a
Yeah.
parent more than anything. But, you say something or do something, and then like the next thing you know, like you mentioned something about like a class or something. The next thing you know, they're taking it, and you're like, whoa, like I didn't necessarily mean for you to like immediately sign up for that class in college or whatever. But so when I'm thinking about it, I do try very hard to be a positive influence on her. And I think of her when I am writing Twitter content or podcast content or Instagram content for my audience.
She's in college now?
Hmm.
What's she
She's
studying?
a senior, mechanical engineering.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So I
Smarty
didn't influence
pants.
her that way. That's
Okay. Okay.
My husband
Well,
is
that's
the
exciting.
mechanical engineer, and that's been adorable to watch unfold too, because he's an only child. And then, so now for him, because he and I have been together 10 years now, so she was 12 when they met, and to watch their relationship grow and
Oh,
change
okay.
has been really cool. And my dad got a mechanical engineering degree, but never became an actual licensed engineer. He got into like sales and stuff. But my husband is a licensed fire protection engineer with his own firm, and she sees that, and she's gone to some conferences with him and stuff, and she's pretty into it. So she ended up, I think, following him in that case and not me, which I could not be more proud with my finance degree.
Yeah, so he met her when she was 12, so he was about, are you guys the same age?
He's 3 years younger than me, so he's 10 years older than her.
Okay, so he
So
was 22. Sorry, he was
yeah,
22, she was
yeah.
12.
Yep.
And you you already hinted that you went the finance route. Now, you were already asking all those money questions growing up. Before we get to college, though, like talking about that relationship with your younger sister and what's happening with your brother and the trauma, there's definitely some fast growing up for Lauren. And do you think that that fast growing up for you led you to adulting faster than you otherwise would have?
I know for a fact it did. And the biggest example of that is when I bought my first house. So
Yeah.
I went to college. I graduated in 2012, which was like the Great Recession, right? And so I didn't get a good job out of college. I got a job at Toys R Us, which don't get me wrong, it was enough that I could buy a house because that's where the story is going, right? But it was like kind of demoralizing to get a 3.94 GPA from the University of Florida in finance and end up a front end department supervisor of Toys R Us. But it was in my hometown. I felt it was important to go back to my hometown because my sister was now 9 years old and she was five when I left. And that was like pretty formative time. Not that, I mean, I was only 2 hours away, so I saw her every month. I made an effort to see her every month, but so I moved back home because, I didn't have any money. And then I saved up money for like 6 months and I was going to keep saving money and living at home because I thought that'd be a good move. But like my brother was like doing drug deals in the driveway, like in the middle of the night every night. And it was like really disruptive. And I was also super frustrated with my parents for like letting this go on. But like, I don't know what they were supposed to do. Do you know what I
Hmm.
actually like truly, especially as I get older, I'm like, I don't know what you do. But I was like, this sucks. But I decided I don't have to live through this. My sister was on the other side of the house, which is not a huge house, like 2,000 square feet, which is a big house, but like my sister was on the other side of the house, so I don't think she was being disrupted like I was. And that's why I moved out. And then it was the difference between renting or buying. And I had, from working in college, I had like $12,000 saved. And I had like a couple of store credit cards that I had gotten probably stupidly, but forgot about. And so I was approved to buy a $125,000 house and put like 5 or 10% down. And I did that because it was the mortgage was 725 and the rent other places was like 850. So I just
So you were
ended
like,
up,
hey, it's just math.
yeah, I bought this house. I went under contract when I was 22, closed when I was 23. And so that was kind of a very obvious example of adulting pretty young, but
Yeah,
as
that's
a
right.
direct result of being like, I can't live in the one bedroom over from my brother. I just couldn't, I really couldn't do it anymore.
Wow. So let's take a step back and go back to college before we dive into the journey with financial independence. What led you? I mean, it makes sense that you would go the finance route given all the conversations you had around money going up and the fascination you seemed to have had with it through your curiosity. Was that why you chose a finance degree?
Well, my parents, my dad, my parents, but my dad, right? Because he's the one that had the job, were paying, but there were strings to that. So there were only
Okay.
certain degrees I was allowed to get. And I knew like I didn't want to be a doctor. Like I've talked about empathy already. Like I'm not the most empathetic person on the planet. I've learned a lot of it. I was in sales for a long time and like you have to learn empathy, but and I don't like blood. Like I don't even like my own blood. I was like, okay, I can't be a doctor. I really considered being a lawyer. And my dad had me interview a couple of his friends that were lawyers, and they were both like, absolutely would be a horrible idea to be a lawyer. So I didn't want to become a lawyer anymore either. So my dad probably would have wanted me to do engineering, like he started to, but remember, he got this engineering degree, but then didn't really do engineering. And so maybe and I'm so much like him. So maybe he thought, okay, that's not a good move. So I was allowed to do business. And I actually wanted to do marketing because I thought, like, what's more important in business than getting the word out, like the
Mm-hmm.
doing the
Mm-hmm.
marketing.
That's
And
right.
I just thought it was like kind of fun and kind of cool. But he wouldn't let me do that. He was like, you can do economics, accounting, or finance. Like, you can't do general business, you can't do international business, you can't do marketing, you can't do management. And so I had like basically this list of stuff, and I was like, all right, fine. Like, I'll do finance. And actually, for like a brief moment, I tried accounting, and no offense, Clint, did not like that. So then I
Yeah,
went
yeah,
back,
I've
went
never
back to
liked it either.
finance.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a CPA.
Yeah, yeah, I have a master's in accounting. I'm a CPA, but I don't like accounting. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you went the finance route, and it's interesting. When did you pivot from finance to sales? And what drove that? Because that was the majority of your career, right?
Yes, definitely. And my dad is in sales. My grandfather was in sales. And so that's what really made me, and just knowing I was so similar to those two men, I was like, I could probably do this. But so I picked finance in college, was decent enough at it that I did get one B, but it was freshman year and it was a B minus. And I've just always been good at school. If I could have like got paid to go to school, I probably should have done that, to be honest. But I worked for the utility company at school and like got into like naturally spreadsheets and stuff like that. I was in strategic planning, so there was a ton of like exactly what it sounds, strategic planning. And it was cool because the utility there is owned by the city. And so you're very joined up with the city that you're living in and what is the future going to look like. So that was like actually a pretty fun internship. I worked 2 days a week for 2 years, 2 or 3 days, depending. And then that's where I like built up like typical spreadsheet skills, email skills, presentations, all the kind of entry level stuff that you need to know. So naturally, that's how I ended up as a retail manager at Toys R Us. I could not find an actual job in finance. And I really, like I said, wanted to come back to St. Pete, where I was born, where my sister was, but like I couldn't get a job at Jabil, which is huge down here, HSN, Raymond James, Florida Power, Progress Energy, because my dad worked there and they're not cool with that. So, just like I couldn't find a job in finance. So I took it. And once I took the retail job, I decided I'm going to give this a year. I'm not just, and I'm really going to try. I'm not going to make this like some stepping stone thing. These people are offering me a job when nobody else is. They're taking a chance on me. I'm in this management trainee program where they're supposed to rotate you around the store and learn different things. I was like, I'm going to give it everything I've got for a year. At the end of that year, they told me, which was like July to June, they told me, you're going through another Christmas season at the front end. We're not rotating you. And then I felt like, okay, I gave you guys everything I said I would. You have not held up your end of the deal. You're not rotating me like you're supposed to. So that's when I went on Craigslist and I found this like really sketchy job posting, but it sounded like kind of cool because it was in downtown St. Pete and that's where my dad worked. And I just thought it was cool. And so it was for an accounting position, of course. So I took this accounting specialist position where I actually did sales orders and accounts payable. And so I did that for a year. And after a year, they posted a job for an inside sales position on LinkedIn.
Oh.
And I like, this is so dumb. I didn't even like go talk to, this is a company of like 20 people. Okay. It was like a family. We're there this is pre-COVID, obviously, right? This is like 2013, 14. I didn't even go talk to anybody. I just hit the apply button. Like that's so like don't do that. Anybody listening, like just like that's such a strange thing to do, not talk to
And
the person.
did they walk down the hall and be like, "Was that
She
you
was
who
no, she
hit
ran
apply?"
out and she goes, "Yes, Lauren, yes," which I thought was hilarious. But like I didn't tell my boss in accounting that I was even thinking like I just like that is not the right way to do it. Like I should have talked to him and then maybe, but
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And her name's Carol. She was so excited that I feel like accounting basically had to be like, okay, like we've got to let you go. And they batted the idea around of me doing both for a while, but they really decided that the business needed the inside salesperson so badly that they had to transition me into inside sales like as soon as possible. But I was there, of course, to help onboard the new accounting person. And then I also had a big leg up on a lot of salespeople that started because I knew what all of our products were. We sold training and we sold in-person training experiences. And so I had
Mm.
gone through all of our programs. I also, better than any salesperson, probably knew the back end. I mean, I knew the accounting system. I knew how sales orders were entered. Like I knew how we were using Salesforce at the time for CRM. I knew how all of this stuff communicated with each other. I also, like the salespeople were all remote. I had all these relationships at headquarters and stuff. So even though I was a new salesperson, they like every new salesperson, it would take like a year, they said, a year or two to like get up to speed. I was up to speed in like 6 weeks. I sold like a massive deal like in 6 weeks from getting into sales. I think because I had just been there a year.
Yeah, yeah, you
But
soaked it all up.
there was no downside too also to this. Like I was making, I think my salary was $33,000 when I was in accounting and the inside sales salary was 40 and there was like $20,000 in potential commissions.
Commissions
I
and
was like, so
bonuses.
like,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I was like, okay, so worst case, so I was bored already. I was like, I was a year and I was like, okay, cool. this has been great and all, but I felt like I knew everything. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave this job anyways. So even if they fire me, even if I'm terrible at sales, I still made it. They'll give me a year. I mean, I at least like show up and stuff. Like they'll give me a year and I'll make $40,000. I was like, and even if I fail, like they'll find something else for me to do back in accounting. Like I don't know. So anyways, like I just felt like there was no downside, and because there was a salary. A lot of sales jobs, like if you're like a realtor or if you're
Sheer
like
commission.
a CFP or something, it's like, yeah, you like it's all based on how you do. And I was like, so there's like no downside here. My dad's good at it. My grandpa's good at it. I'm so similar to both of them. I was like, this is awesome. And so, like, so far in our story, like, the biggest financial moves that I made that have been great for me were buying that first house for sure during, I mean, like 2012. Like, looking back, there wasn't a better time to buy a house, but it was scary at the time. But that equity is sitting in a 6 unit apartment building right now, right? Like,
Yeah, and
that was
we're
great.
gonna get into
No,
that.
I know, I know.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then getting into sales because like spoiler alert, I didn't just make between 40 and $60,000 that year or ever again. Like it was a lot more than that.
Yeah, and I want to spend some time on that because the for those who are listening, generally with like a manufacturing company or maybe even with what you were doing, you start as an inside sales person. Sometimes you might even start as a sales coordinator. Then you're an inside salesperson. Then you get to be an outside salesperson, which is like you're going on the road, you're going to the conferences, you're visiting the clients, you're getting out and wheeling and dealing, and you're sending those people to your inside salesperson, and then the next step in that is you come back into the office and you're a sales manager and then a director of sales. So you take on that sales role. What was the next step for you as you grew your sales career?
So that first year, the quota for the outside sales reps, remember I'm the first inside sales rep, and they've tried this before, but it was like 2008 or something when they tried it.
Yeah.
So obviously like that didn't go very well because of the economy. So it had been like 5 years since they had tried having an inside sales force. And so I was really the only one there. And then there were the outside salespeople. Their quota was 1 million. Every outside salesperson at the time, their quota was $1 million. They made my quota 500,000. And they gave me like a book of like kind of recurring type orders, but they also gave me small leads or anything that the outside salespeople, maybe they were too busy to handle, but it just seemed small, like a small company or a small deal, and they would give it to me. I was just knocking these things down. And so I sold $700,000 my first year instead of 500. So I think I made like $64,000 that year,
Nice.
which was crazy because at Toys R Us I had made 28,000, right? So like we're talking like more than double. Like I was like
Yeah.
on cloud nine. At this point I'm like 24 years old or something. And I've got my house. That's when I bought my second car. My parents had bought me my first. Like, dude, I am living at this point, right? But after that happened, they're like, "Oh, this is freaking awesome." They hired two more inside salespeople and like had me like train them. I actually probably still have my in my book that I made. Oh, I do on how to like train them. So I'm training these other two inside salespeople, and then they promoted me into what they called a hybrid role, which they made up. And then my quota was I think 750 or 700. They probably made my quota seven, like what I had sold the year before. And then I blew that out of the water again. And then they maybe realized, okay, and maybe this isn't me as like a bad like I wasn't technically these people's manager. Maybe I'm a bad trainer, but like I couldn't duplicate what I was doing no matter how hard I tried in these two people. And so they actually shut down the inside sales role again, let those two people go, and just promoted me into complete outside sales. And so we were back to just outside sales reps. It's just that I was one. And they then shrunk the outside sales force and made our quotas higher than $1 million is what they did. And we were still paid really well. But that's so like to your point, I definitely went inside to hybrid to outside, but I was still because I was local, still coming into the office 2 or 3 days a week, but I was on the road a lot. I mean, definitely like had status with Southwest Airlines, which is just you get
Yeah.
A-list, you get on first, but I enjoyed it and I got a bunch of drink tickets. But so but like definitely so I was traveling, 2, 3 times a month, enough that it was weird if I was home 2 weeks in a row, and did that then for years. There was no real option to be an inside sales manager, or I'm sorry, a sales manager for me, because it was just such a small company, and it
Small
was
family shop.
shrinking. Like I said, we sold in-person training. And so
Hmm.
I was in charge of the engagement team for a while, which was the culture team of the company. And then they put me on like this like strategic planning team. And like we would have these meetings. And I love these people to this day. Like I love all these people. But like we would go in there and we would like decide we need to like get on the internet. Like we need to have some e-learning. And every like 6 months we'd have one of these meetings about the future of the company, what we should do, and then we never did it. We just
Yeah.
continued selling 8 hour long in-person training, and I I was selling more and more, but it was getting harder and harder every year. And I just it was the company was shrinking. So there was no opportunity. And that's really what caused me to leave after a while. Is I got really tired of banging my head against the wall, wanting more for this company than either the owners wanted, or maybe more than they could afford to invest in. I'm not really sure, but I got tired of having the same conversation with people being like, I love your stuff. Do you have it short, or do you have it online? And me having to be like, no, 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 no.
So at that stage, how many years were you there before you left? So you did a year of accounting, year of inside slash, then a year of hybrid slash, and then you were outside. So how many years were you at that shop in total?
In total, the whole time I was 7 years.
7 years.
So maybe like
And
five outside,
five outside. And
I think.
in those 5 years, how did your salary progress?
But the salary would go up and then it would go down, go up, go down. It just depended. Like it depended on my quota. It depended what I hit. But I peaked in 2018. I made $200,000 and I was 28 years old, which was good because
Nice.
I needed a car. So I paid cash for a car. Well, I put on a credit card and then I paid the credit card off. And then the next year I paid for our wedding. So that was really key. So I stayed there. I stayed there one more year. I like when you're doing like your wedding planning, I didn't want to be like doing a new
Yeah, you didn't
job.
want to be stressed out with a
So I
new job.
stayed, and I
Yeah.
had good like built up like obviously a lot of rapport with everybody, but also like good PTO and stuff for
Yeah.
taking off to do different things and then doing the wedding and the honeymoon and stuff. So 2018 is when I peaked. 2019, I probably made 150, 160, something like that. And then in February 2020, I changed jobs, and it was a good time to leave an in-person training company in February of 2020.
Oh, wow. Fortuitous. It's almost like you had a crystal ball. But let's
I didn't, but
rewind it. Where in there, how old were you when you met Eric, and how did you meet your husband?
we met online in 2015, and I was 25 and he was 22. He he had a
Which app were you using back then?
it was okay Cupid. That's
Okay,
what it
Cupid.
was,
Okay,
which is
okay,
like the
okay.
free one owned by Match at the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't know
Match.com.
anymore.
Yeah.
Obviously haven't looked into it in like 10 years. So
Okay.
I should. My sister probably should get on there. She's gonna be 22, but yeah. So we met online. He quote unquote lived with a roommate. It was his dad,
Yeah,
but he
his
told
roommate
me
was
it
his parents.
was literally his
Yeah,
dad.
okay.
In his defense, his dad had moved in with him after a divorce, and then his dad built a house, and then he moved in with his dad. So it was sort of
Oh,
like a
that's
roommate
sweet. Yeah, that's
situation.
pretty cool.
And it was fun. Like I would just go spend the night. Like he never like the dad never even said anything. He was never like, "Who's this chick?" I was just like totally allowed to stay there and whatever. So
Well, you're in your 20s. You're not kids
yeah, but
anymore.
still,
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
it was like very roommate feeling. And he'd like buy
Yeah.
wine, and we at like Costco, and we drink it all. And but yeah, so we met. But at the time, I had had my house for like 3 years. I was in either the inside sales job, or I was probably still in the inside sales job. Eric was just starting his master's in engineering. He had one class done. He had just graduated undergrad. He had just bought a brand new car. with a payment. And I was like, wow, great.
Oh,
Like
you
I
had
was
to
brought
start
up like
educating him
I
fast.
I did like one of on our second date, I was like, you are one fight away with your dad and one missed paycheck away from not having anywhere to live. I don't know how to explain this to you. And he took that to heart and saved like $5,000 immediately. He was spending all of his money, but in his defense, he was like making double payments on his car to try to pay it off and stuff like that.
Okay.
But, you know,
Yeah.
but he had like a 2.99 interest rate on his car, so I was like, it probably makes
It's not
sense
too bad. Yeah.
to honestly like do other stuff with this. But he saved his emergency fund and he started a Roth IRA right away from those conversations. So he came around really quickly. So I did appreciate that. Also, he was just young, like
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
he moved from his
I
dad's
I
house to
didn't
my
know
house.
anything about money at his age. My wife, similar to you, started teaching me at that point in time, right? Like, hey, don't carry a credit card balance.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
what is this?
He
Okay,
was like,
yeah,
he knew like you don't carry a credit card balance, but like you totally do if it's 0%, you know? Like
yeah,
and that
yeah.
can get dangerous. So he actually had put his down payment from his car on a 0% credit card. So he had a year to pay off his down payment on his car.
You meet him, you're 25, he's 22. How many years into the sales role are you at that point in time?
It's like year one,
Okay,
like
so
year
you're
two,
about
maybe.
60 grand at that point.
Yeah.
He's still in school.
Yeah, he was working
But
full time. So I think he was because he was like an early engineer. Well, I mean, not a licensed engineer, but had the engineering degree, which anybody who's in engineering would understand. Like he had the EIT, not a PE. But he was making like 55 and I think I was making like 65. And
oh,
then I
so you're
had
pretty
that.
close.
Yeah, we were close, but like
But
bills were new.
you financially were ahead.
Well, way ahead. And bills were new for him, having lived with his dad. So when he moved in with me and I wanted to split everything, it was like, oh, you mean I don't just have to make the payment on the TV as my rent? Like, no, there's more to it than that, you know.
So how long were you guys together before you moved in together?
6 months.
6 months. You moved quick, Lauren. You knew what you wanted. I like it.
Well, I had a guy roommate and I've always had guy roommates and I think it made him a little uncomfortable, you know.
That makes sense.
But like
That
he
makes
was like,
sense.
I'll be your guy roommate, you know?
You're like, okay, let's do this.
Yeah. And it
And,
really was,
and,
just for the record, truly just a roommate. When he moved in, he brought clothes and a mattress, and that's it. I
it's
was
very
like,
guy-like.
it was so guy like, but I was like, this is not my type of guy, you know? I need a guy with furniture.
Yes. So, and then how long did you live together before you got married?
So that would be 2016 to 2019. So 3.5 years.
Okay, okay. And if I'm not mistaken, you bought your first investment property after you were married, or was it before?
I bought our second primary before we were married. I bought my first house in 2012. I bought my second house in 2017. So
Okay.
we moved from my first house to my second house together, and he helped me pick that out. And then we rented out my first house.
One of your earlier properties, you were house hacking it, if I'm not mistaken. Was that
We
property
went
number two?
we went to house hacking. Property number 3 was a duplex. So I sold the first house. We rented it out for 2 years. Then I sold it to because in the United States at least, if you live in something for 2 years, 2 of the last 5 years, you don't have to pay any taxes on the capital gains. So you can
Oh,
rent something
okay.
for 3 years after you've lived in it for two, and then take all of that appreciation and pocket it. So I did that. Then I took that and paid cash for a duplex. And we were living still in just the regular second house at that point. And then, so it was the fourth property that we actually, after we were married, bought it together, but it was with equity from that house and remodeled. But that was the house hack with the 2 units in the back.
So let's rewind then. Let's go back to what drove the decision to buy the second home and to rent out the first home. What was the
Okay.
decision there? Because now you're becoming a real estate investor. And so you had always known a little bit about money. It sounded like your mom owned an investment property or two early on, when she had you. You said at that point they were making the same money, but she had purchased investment properties. Did your mom and dad keep buying investment properties, and was that always something that you were like, "Oh, that seems like a good path that I want to take when I'm older"?
I think this answer is going to be the weirdest one for you. So, my mom bought her first house at 22. She bought investment property at 24. My dad's parents had multiple homes and they followed like some 0% down guru guy at the time, like where I think they like bought like VHSs and watched them and did his
Yeah,
approach, right?
the guy on the yachts with the no money down, like
Yeah. I forget his name,
there's an
but
Asian guy like Tommy something. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I forget who they used, but they had
Yeah.
investment properties. So they like threw my mom a party when she bought her first investment property with like a cake and stuff. My dad's parents, okay? And like my parents are just dating at this point, and my dad was like, "Hey, really proud of you. Let's never do that again." And
Oh.
they never bought another investment property. And as a matter of fact, they sold that
No.
property to my brother 40 years later. Swear
Oh,
on my life. I
so
swear on my life.
traumatic.
That's so crazy. My dad hates real estate. So, but that's why the second part of this answer is going to really weird you out. So, I bought the second house with all intentions of being like completely normal, right? Like I was making good money. Like I bought a BMW, this house in a golf course community. Like I'm moving closer to Eric's work because he was living pretty far from his work at this time. Because I wasn't planning on meeting somebody from Playett City when I bought in St. Pete because I was like a 45-minute commute for him and a 10-minute commute for me. So, you know, like I was just gonna be totally normal and I was gonna sell my first house, buy the second one, put 20% down, and just, you know, put money in my 401k and Roth IRA and work until I was 65. That was the complete plan. My dad goes, I think you should keep your first house and rent it out. Because recall, they have one rental property at this point, and they only ever had one. But they thought you should have one literally as a backup plan in case your house got destroyed by a hurricane, that you should have one.
Oh, I mean, yeah, that makes some sense. You are in
I mean,
Florida.
this is like pre any of that crap. Like
Yeah.
it's funny. And now he doesn't have it anymore. So now he comes to my house because he sold the house to my brother, but whatever. So he's like, you got to do whatever you need. And I was to keep the first house. And I was like, well, I didn't put 20% down on that one. So I had been paying PMI. I was like, I don't want to do that on this one. He was like, well, like, what do you need? I was like, I need to borrow $28,000 to be able to put 20% down. And he goes, okay. I was like, oh, so that's actually how that happened. I borrowed
Oh, wow.
$28,000 from him. And then I was just
Wow.
paying him back every month.
And
So that
he had
guy,
always been reticent about buying more, but he saw for you at least buy one. And he didn't realize maybe that the just buy one would turn into a bug.
yes,
And when you bought that one, it was 2019.
2017 is when I bought,
2017. Yeah.
yeah, is when I bought the second
And
house
then
and kept
married
the
in
first one.
2019. When
And
did
then
you sell the first one?
2019, sold the first one in 2019 and bought the duplex in
Bought a
2019.
duplex in
So in
2019,
2019, we're sitting on
got
the
married,
primary residence duplex. That's it.
duplex, got married. February of 2020, you quit the job. You start a new role as a salesperson. What type of sales was that?
Custom training, baby. When people ask me,
Custom
can you
training.
do it? I wanted to be like, yes, I can do that.
Whatever
That's
you
why.
want, we
Yes,
can
a
train it.
pure custom, baby. Like I
Okay.
am here for it.
And then COVID hits.
Yeah.
Then COVID hits.
Yeah.
So what happens to your sales role when COVID hits?
I kept it.
And
I had a $120,000 salary and I rode out all of COVID on that.
boom.
Yeah.
So you're still making good money.
Hmm.
And at first in COVID, for those of us in the real estate world, it was like you were scared. You were like, are my tenants moving out? Are they not going to be able to pay me?
Yeah.
So what was that? Before we go on to when it got good, let's stick with that moment.
Oh
Like
yeah, like
how
that.
scary was that for you as a landlord?
It wasn't just scary, it happened. Like we
Yeah.
had the one side stopped paying, but when he called me to tell me it stopped paying, like he also, I guess, had been in like jail because he had a domestic with a girl that he had moved in to
Oh,
my unit.
geez. Yep.
And she got a restraining order against him and locked him out of the place where he had a lease. So then I had a squatter. So not only did I have somebody not paying, I had a squatter in the unit and a moratorium on evictions. So I couldn't get anybody to get her out. And so that was what was
Ugh.
going on in the duplex at the time, that we were under contract on a bed and breakfast when the world shut down for COVID, and bed and breakfasts also shut down. So
Of
that is
course.
what was happening. So I will say, like, it was really excellent timing on the job front, kind of not excellent timing on the real estate front for me.
And did Florida, or did your area of Florida, I know here the government introduced programs that kind of said, hey, like if your tenants aren't paying rent, here's a way they can apply for aid that'll allow them to pay you, or certain banks did moratoriums on mortgage payments to allow the homeowners and the landlords who weren't getting paid to not lose their properties. What were those programs like for you? And you're a pretty studious, industrious woman. Like, were you the one that had to find all of these for your tenants to keep everything afloat?
We didn't have a mortgage. We had paid cash, which was a
Oh,
blessing at this point. And it was a duplex.
beauty.
So at least the one side was paying. So the property was at least paying more than paying for itself, which was good, which was sort of the point. This was in kind of a bad area. And so I knew we would have more vacancy than in like a typical class A, class B rental. So that was one of the reasons I paid cash. Also, I paid cash because I had been trying to buy a duplex with financing and I couldn't. I was getting beat out left, right, and center by cash. So that's why I sold the first house so I could buy that for cash and win it, which, we can talk more about it, whether that it's good I won it or not. But, and then in terms of getting rent help, you had to be a tenant. And I didn't have a tenant. I didn't even know this girl's name. I had a squatter and she wouldn't answer the door when I had no way to get through to her. And she
So
wouldn't answer the door when I was there.
what was the eventual path for that? Like, how did you ultimately get her out and get someone in who was paying you?
Yeah, so she had utility accounts set up in her name somewhere else. And for some reason, she wasn't able to set the utilities up in her name. And so she broke both of the meters, water and electric, and was stealing utilities. And both of the companies found out and shut the utilities off. And so this is going into like June now in Florida, super
It's
uncomfortable.
hot.
Yeah. And so my tenant next door, the one who was paying, super nice lady. I hope she's doing great. Um, she tells me, okay, she moved in, she moved in a homeless guy, and then like she bit the homeless guy, and so the homeless guy moved out, and like there's all this other craziness going on over there. She's like, can you do anything? I was like, listen, I would love to, but I can't get a lawyer to take this case because there's a moratorium on evictions, and this actually isn't an eviction. It's like worse than that, but courts are kind of waiting. And I was like, there's really nothing I can do. I said, unless she abandons the property. If she's ever gone for more than 2 weeks and doesn't tell me that she's planning on coming back, then I can go in and do something about it. And she goes, okay, got it. 2 weeks and one day later, she calls me and she goes, hey, haven't seen her in 2 weeks. She's definitely abandoned this place. And so we took a locksmith over there, changed the locks, got back in. And then that night she broke the back window, broke back in, broke the stove. I don't know if she did it on purpose or if she did it just jumping through the window and grabbed some of her stuff and left. And that was
Mm,
that.
boom. So now you're able to put a tenant in who can pay you. You've got both sides paying. Lauren, crazy question. Given that experience, what made you decide that you were going to build a rental portfolio? Because that does not sound like a great start. You know that I had within the first 6 months of my rental property, the tenants stole our washer and dryer on their way out for an eviction. And so I get it. I still had a belief in real estate, but I don't know why maybe it's because I worked in the industry, but why did you still have a belief in real estate?
Well, bold of you to assume the new tenant was paying, first of
Oh,
all.
geez. Oh, geez.
She only paid like one month, but then she did do the rental assistance and got me paid. But that so it was like another like 4 or 5 months with no rent from that side. But anyways, that worked out. Well, first of all, we were already sort of under contract on the bed and breakfast. And my reasoning was I'm gonna do short-term rentals because you really can't have a squatter in a short-term rental. They
Yes.
don't have Tennessee rules. And so that's what I decided to do. I decided to build a rental portfolio. For people who don't know, short term, we've talked about it before, obviously, but Airbnbs, vacation rentals, seasonal rentals,
That's right.
if as long as people don't stay 1 full month or 30 days, they can be removed. And like I have cameras and I have locks and I can have notifications. Like they could walk out the door and I could hit a button and lock them out. I don't even have to be there. I've only had one attempted squatter situation in the short-term rentals since then. Oh, after like well over 1,000 different guest stays. And I actually talked to the cops at that time as they were removing her, and they said it's actually you actually can have people in there longer than that. It just depends on if it's through like an Airbnb or some kind of platform like that, and the agreement is it's a short-term stay, then that actually is different than tenancy anyways. But
Perfect.
yeah.
So the let's take a step back. You'd always been curious about money. You'd always been studying finances. When did you first start to learn about the concept of financial independence? And what type of financial independence did you first start to learn about?
It was when I got the first rental property. So my dad surprised me. He was like, "Yeah, you can
Okay.
borrow $28,000." And I was like, "Okay." So I was like, "Okay, well now, like you said, I'm a real estate investor. So I need to read about real estate investing." So, and it doesn't take very long when you start reading about real estate investing that you bump up against financial independence, retire early. You're gonna get there pretty
That's right.
quickly. And
And what was your reading? Were you like bigger pockets? Was it books? Because I
yeah.
know you and I both recommended bigger pockets to people in the past.
Yeah, definitely started listening to the Bigger Pockets podcast, read some of those books, but I really branched out to totally different. Like I read some books on just the ratios and finances and analyzing properties. I read some books on managing properties. Those are from Bigger Pockets. And then just started reading some general personal finance books as well. And I, of course, first learned about financial independence, retire early, as in like lean fire. Like
Yeah.
you make 200 grand, you spend 25, you retire with 5 or 600 grand, and that's it, right? And
And you live a
that
really
was what brought
sad,
us.
horrible life for the
Yeah,
rest of your life.
that's way too little for me. And there's like no wiggle room in that. Like if what
Yeah.
happened to our insurance policies, if that happened and I was planning, like I would immediately be
You're
back to
dead.
work. I mean,
Yeah, for
immediately.
sure. That's one of the problems. There's no safety net with lean fire.
No, there's not enough. So but the general idea intrigued me of this. If you save 25 times what you're spending in a year, you can retire. That intrigued me. And then I was looking at
Yes.
what we were spending in a year, and our mortgage payment was, I think, like after taxes for the year was like $30,000, which I would love to have that now, let me tell you. But um that means you've got to make say 35, $40,000 before taxes to pay for that, right? And so I was like, man, that's a big chunk of money that we're making that is going towards just where we're living. What if we could get rid of that? And because I had been reading Bigger Pockets books, I learned about house hacking. And I learned that I had been doing house hacking when I had a roommate, because that technically counts,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
But I was like, maybe let's house hack in a way that we don't have a roommate in our house. Let's house hack in a way where we have a single family home and another unit, an accessory dwelling unit. I was thinking above garage apartment type thing. And when you run those calculations, you can bring, if I could literally cut the biggest portion of our budget from, $30,000 to zero, that's a big deal. And that means the money that you need to have saved for retirement goes down like
Yes.
exponentially.
Yes.
And I did that math and I went to my now husband and I told him, and he was like, no, like we just bought this house because we'd only been in that golf course community in that nice house for like 3 years. And I was like, okay, but like look at the spreadsheet, right? Like,
I
and
mean, the
he
numbers
and he
don't
came
lie.
and he came around and he was like, okay, we'll look. I'm not saying we'll buy, but we'll look. And so that's really what did it was it did not take me very long to becoming a landlord, learning about being a landlord, finding the fire movement, and learning about retiring early and thinking real estate is a great way to do this. I will say we were still maxing our 401ks and maxing our Roth IRAs at the time. We have yet to a lot of real estate investors do eventually abandon those methods of investing, but even to this day we have not. So we also have that stuff as well.
And so, Lauren, what that would have been early COVID.
2020. Yep.
Yeah. When did you decide? Because we talked about the start to COVID with tenants and the problem. And then the positive was mid 2020 to generally most geographies mid 2022, the market went on fire.
Yeah.
Right? Like it was certain areas 60%, like I'll use us as an example here in Vancouver. We appreciated about 65% from April 2020 to May 2022. What was that like for you, and how were you acquiring properties during that time?
So we bought the bed and breakfast in June 2020. It had a main house and two cottages. That was remodeled by January 2021, which was perfect timing because in Florida, that's peak season. January to April's peak season. You guys can't see this, but Clint has a beanie on, and
Yeah.
I do not have a beanie on, and I'm wearing short sleeves. Okay, there's a very
Yeah.
different situation in January.
T-shirt, hoodie, and I'm
Yeah,
indoors.
as we were recording in January, very different situation up north than
Yeah,
down here in Florida, right? So I can always tell when it's snowing because I get booking after booking after. I'm like, huh, must be a
for
snowing somewhere.
sure.
But anyway, so that's when we launched. We obviously did so well January to April that we were like, all right, let's look for something else. And my husband really wanted to live on the water, but I was like, that's way too expensive and we've got flood insurance problems and blah blah blah. I thought, but what if we get a property that's like not too far away, like 25, 30 minutes away that is on the water that can work as a short-term rental and maybe he can get his fix of being on the water without blowing up our awesome house hacking situation that we have. And so we bought this. It was a beautiful property, 3,000 square foot duplex on the water, 25 minutes north of where we lived in the house hack. And one side was had a long-term tenant with a 3-year lease, and one side was being vacated by a house hacker, someone that had been living there. And so our plan was to short-term rent that side of it. And so that was in August of 2021, which is way low season, by the way.
Nice. So good
So we
time to
went
buy.
from when we did the bed and breakfast, we had the two cottages in the back. We also had our camper, and then we added those two. So we went from just having the duplex with long-term tenants on each side, sometimes paying, to adding the camper and two more units, so going to five, and then adding two more and going to seven over the course of like just 2021. Actually, and we bought another property in 2021 that took our number of units from 7 to 13. So,
And where on this journey is this when you start percolating the idea of I've been on this financial independence journey. I've been reading about real estate. I've been reading about investing. I'm going to start a podcast sharing this knowledge and talking to people in this space uh, for people who are in a similar situation to my sister who need to learn these lessons because there's a path for people that's different. I would say it's still not mainstream. I mean, it's the path least trodden. So, when did you start to percolate that you were going to launch Adulting is Easy?
so in 2017, April is financial literacy month. I think that's what it's called. Something
Hmm.
about personal finance. And I worked for that training company, and our biggest product was a business finance training. But they were like, let's write a blog for personal finance for Financial Literacy Month in April. And Lauren, do you want to do it? Because they knew I was like sort of into this stuff because I just generally talked about it. So I wrote this blog and it was like 10 pages long. I was like, okay, this is not a blog. I saved that 10 pages worth of stuff. But then I started thinking, like, if I did start a blog with like multiple writings in it, what would I call it? And I thought adulting is easy would be kind of like funny, like telling. I actually hated the word adulting at the time, but I was like, but what if we related it to money and it wasn't like mom stopped making my dentist appointments? I looked on Twitter and I was like, and adulting is easy was available in 2017. So I grabbed it and I saved those 10 pages. And that's all I did for like a while after that. I don't know when I started writing the blogs, but like writing, I didn't like as much. Also, writing is frankly a little more work than a podcast to me.
Hmm.
And in podcasts, I feel like people are a lot more forgiving with things if you like mess up or say the wrong thing or it's not as perfectly crafted as actual copy on the page. Also, really sillily of me, but I have kind of a deep voice for a female, and a lot of female voices sort of bother me. And I thought if other people, and this, I know that's bad. Yeah, I know women, I know, come at me. Like that makes me like a non-ally of my own gender. I get it. But I thought maybe my deep,
Can I say as a guy, it's say like I do find it harder to listen to a lot of women's podcasts for that reason.
it bothers me. And I thought, okay, I have a good voice for
Yeah, I
that.
don't notice it with I don't have that issue.
I was
I
like,
mean,
let
you and
me
I have
do that.
talked online for years and I don't have that issue.
I'm glad to hear it. And I've always been told that I have this deep voice and that people like my voice. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's do podcasting. So it wasn't
Yeah.
this like big ordained awesome thing. It came on really slowly over time. But I started the podcast right after we got married. And I'd already been writing before
Okay.
that. And so I think in my mind it was like because like wedding planning is like a thing that you're doing. And when that's done, I knew I was going to have more time in my life. And so it was like October 2019 when I actually started Adulting is Easy, the podcast. But Adulting is Easy, the website and blog existed for a short time before that,
Okay, so right before COVID, and when did you start to really amp it up on Twitter?
right about the time I met you. So I think 2021.
Yeah,
Does that
because
sound right?
well, it might have even been early 2022 because I started taking Twitter seriously August 2021.
Yes.
I launched my podcast April 2020 or February 20 somewhere April 2021. Started
Hmm.
taking Twitter seriously in August. Steven and a few of us started our groups and we probably we probably got decently sized early 2022 and I think 2022 might have been when the four of us did our year-long spaces every Wednesday night.
Yeah, that sounds right. I feel like it was New Year's when you did an overnight space to get to
That's
10,000
right.
followers.
That's right.
So
I said I wasn't going to get off till we hit 10,000.
yep. So there you go.
Yeah.
That's the
Yeah.
timeline as I recall it. So I think it
Yeah, it was
was
around then.
late 2021 when I really started taking it more seriously. I will say 2024 wasn't a very serious Twitter year for me. I'm really at like keeping it alive at this point. It's
Yeah, I'm in the same boat.
I love for
I
the
don't have the fun that I used to have.
no, I love Elon. I truly do. I just read his biography. Like I think he's brilliant. I really do. I mean, no one's perfect, but like since he took over Twitter, or X, it's been different. It's just been
Yeah, it's not a
different.
community. It's not the same, and it doesn't have that same organic, like we have relationships. We're in the fire community, or we're
Yeah.
in the real estate community, or we have like we have spaces. It's the same like rage bait.
Yeah.
It's just not as enjoyable of an experience. You know, maybe as the business I'm starting. amps up and I've got a little more capacity, I could go back and resurrect it, but I'm keeping it
Right.
on life support similar
That's
to you. I hear
that's
you.
yeah. That's where I'm at. And I know I should be doing more with other things, but I mean we haven't gotten into it, but like I left my job like a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. And like when you make and then making adulting is easy a job, it feels weird now that I don't have one. Like it's like
Well, let's go there. What was I remember the conversations we were having while we were on Spaces in the DMs and should I quit? Should I stay? And a lot of it boiled down to a few things. One, where are you in the numbers? Two, how does that tie to the fire journey that you want to have? And we can talk a little bit about how your vision of fire evolved through adulting is easy, through what you were doing on Twitter, and through me always talking about hellfire and how that's where you wanted to get to. So how did you make that decision? And what went into it? And how have you felt since you did it?
personal finance is a journey. There sort of is a destination, but it's also something that you constantly need to be looking at and evaluating no matter what your goals are. And so our initial goal was financial independence, retire early, like hit financial independence through real estate. And for us, that meant real estate pays all of our bills. And then we have stocks and other ancillary things to pay for vacations, cars, stuff that isn't a recurring and a very obvious recurring expense. And then I was going to leave my job. My husband was going to leave his job. We hit that in what year would that have been? Probably 2022.
Hmm.
And then that's about the time I quit my job, I think. Is that right? Or I quit in 2023? Quit in 2023. So we did one more year after financial independence of me still working, but my husband and the real estate, really the real estate, my husband didn't do much, paying for everything. Basically, everything he made was saved, everything I made was saved. And that's how we knew we had hit financial independence. Now, it wasn't like it wasn't like a 25,000 a year lean fire situation, but it was like a regular fire situation, like living off of like 60 grand per year, which is fine, especially when your living expenses are basically covered and all of that. Um, but about that point, we realized that my husband's company was not something that he wanted to leave yet.
Hmm.
He built an engineering firm with a business partner, and they were growing so much, and he was really having so much fun doing it that we sort of realized A, he wants to work for at least 5 more years and build this thing. And B, at the end of that time, that company's really going to be worth something. And so that's when we really decided, all right, Lauren, you go ahead and quit. It was a little bit of a passing of the baton because I had not that I mean he helped with like every step of the way. We've been together for 10 years, but especially early on, like I had the house, I had the financial knowledge. I got him on board with a lot of these things and I made more money than him for a long time. And I had really set a really solid foundation for us by the time we got married. And then we spent a few years working like truly in tandem 50-50. And then now it was kind of time for him to take the baton, I guess. And that's when we decided to go from fire to coast fire.
Mm.
And that's when we decided basically we have enough foundation. If the company does what we think it's going to do, if our stocks do what we think it's going to do, with the real estate performing as it is, and him making good money, we didn't need my income anymore for sure. And we could basically live off of his income until we sell the firm or save enough. And so that was a big change for us in 2024. And it's been interesting and it's been hard too because I don't know what it is about fire, but like any online community, you can like really find yourself identifying with that and
Yeah.
identifying so to take yourself from being completely financially independent to just coast financially independent, it was like a little bit of an ego hit. But at the end of the day, that's what personal finance is all about. Like it's personal. Like that word
It's
is
personal and
in
it
it.
evolves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it evolves and it changes, and think that's okay. And I like that we did the FI and then Coast Fi in that order versus like trying to do Coast Fi and then hit Fi, because I think that would like I think you sort of have to do the like delayed gratification stuff first. But it's been real like Coast Fi is way more fun than trying to be fire. Like let me tell you, like we bought a big house, we just bought a new car, like we've been buying like good wines and good foods and stuff. Like it's been really fun to let loose a little bit after 5 years of really saving and hunkering down.
Yes, yes. You've continued to grow the real estate portfolio. What does that look like?
We have grown it a bit, grown and shrunk it. That's something that has changed for us too. I mean, there's no question here in Florida that insurance has been an issue, right? And so we've had properties that when we underwrote them, we had so much wiggle room that ended up with very narrow margins. So there's been some give and take from that perspective. But where we left off in the story, we had just bought the duplex, the second duplex, the one on the water. There was a 6 unit apartment building that came up for sale in the same county where my grandma and my uncle live, on this like really cool like clamming island that I had been to a bunch as a child. We ended up wanting to buy that apartment building, but it was like we found it at the same time we were buying this duplex. And we bought this duplex with like savings from our jobs because again, once you remove your mortgage payment, remember we're house hacking. Our expenses are like so close to zero from doing one house hack. I mean, you remove $30,000 like of expenses. That's $30,000 that's going to the bottom line
Yeah,
every
so
year.
your ability to add properties just scales
It's
exponentially.
so much. And then so that's how we were able to buy the duplex, literally from savings. And obviously the interest rate was like 3.25 at the time. It was like so low. And so but we didn't have any more cash. Like we had bought the bed and breakfast, we had sold the house in the golf course community. We had used savings and the equity from that house to remodel and get that up and running. And then we just bought this duplex. But we found the 6 unit apartment building we really wanted. And so we paid full price, but we negotiated seller financing. And we also did a 1031 exchange of that duplex that had been a problem for me. So just as a reminder, my first house I sold, paid no taxes on the gain because I had lived there more than two of the previous 5 years. Then I put that into a paid cash for a duplex, and then I took that duplex, the problem one with the squatter and everything. It had appreciated somehow in 2 years over $100,000. So I didn't really make any money along the way, but it appreciated quite a bit. And then took that equity and put it in this 6 unit apartment building. So that house that I bought at 22 to 23 years old is in a 6 unit apartment building now. So by the end of 2021, we had the two cottages, the camper, which was an STR. Now it's just in my driveway here. We had the duplex and the 6 unit apartment building. So that's like 11. Is that
11 at the
11?
time, yeah.
11 at the time.
Yeah.
So plus our main house. And actually we rented our main house out while we would like move around our units. So we actually had, for all intents and purposes, 12 rentals at the time, which was like so crazy because we went from like in like a year and a half, we went from a duplex to 12 rentals.
Insurance became an issue. Did Florida do any cracking down on Airbnb, or are you still one of the cities, states where Airbnb's been allowed?
So in 2011, Florida passed a law that said whatever regulations you have in place, those are your short term rental regulations. And so
Mm.
Florida is actually one of the few states where you can have a pretty good idea of what your regulations are because nobody can change them.
Yeah,
You could, you,
which for a lot of the listeners and Lauren, cities or provinces or states where you had underwritten short-term rentals, and then the government came in and disallowed the ability to do Airbnb or short-term rentals, really put a lot of people underwater.
yeah, it definitely did. The flip side is people know this about Florida and it has caused it to become, especially in some areas, very oversaturated. Because
Hmm.
people,
Hmm.
who doesn't want to have a house in Florida, right? I mean, a lot of
Yeah.
people do. And I think they underwrite not very conservatively. They really want it to work. And also, a lot of people think, well, if I break even, I'm fine. At least I have a place in Florida. So, especially like in the Orlando area, a little bit on the Panhandle, there's some places that are oversaturated. I have chosen these like regional tourism markets, and my niche is budget friendly clean stays on the west coast of Florida. And so I haven't really suffered from saturation. Also, where two of my units are is a place where there are 6 week minimums, but I bought a bed and breakfast. And so I have special lodging zoning for those two. But they don't crack down. I will say, like, the city doesn't, there are so many that are not allowed because even though the rule is 6 weeks, I don't think the state said, hey, you have to keep your rules and you have to enforce them. You just can't change the rule. There's some of that going on as well. From a regulation perspective, I have all of the state licenses and stuff like that and get the inspections and remit the taxes and do all that stuff right.
So I think we've done a fairly good job of taking the listeners through the life of Lauren and what got you to where you are today, which is a wonderful story and a testament to hard work and saving and financial knowledge. What I want to know is, as Eric continues to grow the firm and build it, and as you continue to grow, adulting is easy, your real estate portfolio, and if you're still doing the other real estate ventures that you're doing, what do the next 5 to 10 years look like for you, Lauren? When you look out on the horizon, what do you see?
It's a really good question. And I just remembered being asked that when I interviewed for that first job that I was working at Toys R Us. I remember they asked me like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was like, dude, I wouldn't be at Toys R Us if I knew the answer to that
Yeah,
question.
yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, I'm
And
gonna be managing 2 stores.
yeah, exactly. I was like,
Awesome.
what? Yeah, no. So a little bit that's always the answer, right? Because we never know what life is going to throw at us. But
That's right.
in 5 years, I would expect my husband's firm to either grow to such a size that he could be a lot more passive than he is and make a good income off of distributions, or to have sold the firm. So, one way or another, in 5 years, he's gonna have the freedom that I have now.
And
I
and
ex
he'll be 37 at the time.
Yes.
He's yeah, okay.
Yes, he's 32. So, exactly. And even if he were to sell the firm in 5 years, he would probably have some earnouts to do. So, the vision is by 40, he's done or very, very passive. My grandmothers will probably be gone by then. They're 90 and 92. But
Oh
I've
wow.
spent the last 2 years spending a ton of time with them. My one grandma, well, her 90th birthday is in 2 weeks, and we're looking forward to that. I'm going to see my other grandma next week. Been spending a ton of time with my parents. My dad just retired, so I anticipate all of that to continue. My nieces are a baby and four. My nephew is two. Looking forward to hanging out with them. My sister's 22. She'll be 27 in 5 years. Like, what an exciting time in her life to be there for
Yeah.
her. And I expect to still be in this house. We bought this house last year, and it really is our dream home. I anticipate putting in a
Is it
pool
on
and a
the water?
pickle. Yeah, on the
Yeah,
water.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
gorgeous. Love it.
I remember all the ones you were showing me, and
I
some
know.
of them, a lot of them you didn't end up getting. So I've probably seen this one. If I haven't, send it in the DM. Send me the
We
links.
we finally did it. I anticipate putting in a pool here and a pickleball court, and I
Oh,
will
the
upgrade.
dream.
I will upgrade my vehicle. I'll be
Well,
drinking good
didn't you just
wine.
do?
I'll be
You got
traveling.
you just bought a pretty nice vehicle in the last
That's
week, did you
that's
not?
Eric's car.
Oh, okay.
I
Wow,
still have the Accord.
that was nice.
It is a nice Lexus GX. Yeah, good for
Yeah,
him.
hard to argue
I'm
with.
not there yet. I just can't quite do it yet. But so I anticipate just really basking in the fruits of our labors in five
Good.
years. I really like that's what I see, and I've been practicing it on and off for the last couple of years. I I bat the idea around of getting my CFP, getting a real estate license, becoming an appraiser, something along those lines, to have something to do that is still part of my passion project. I bat that idea around. I also bat the idea around of maybe having a kid, and that will throw everything I just said
Oh,
into a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
strange
yeah.
position. So my husband and
Well,
I have
you can write about
decided,
it. It gives you a whole other parenting is easy, you know, it gives you a whole
oh
other
yeah,
avenue,
oh my
right?
God,
It's
parenting is
beautiful.
so hard. But yeah, by the end of 2025, I will be 36 and Eric will be 33. And that is when we will make the once and final decision whether we're going to have a kid or not. I don't know that that means we'll try right then, but we're giving ourselves 2025 to make the final decision. But that's really going to drive the next 5 years. But either way, the next 5 years are going to have a lot more freedom and flexibility than the last 5 years did. And that's what I see. And that's what I've been working for. And that's the point, right? Like
That's
if any,
beautiful. Yeah.
that's what you, when you start working hard and smart in your 20s, 35 to 40, that's when you should be able to bask in it. That's enough time.
Yeah. Okay, Lauren, what haven't we covered? Because I know we said an hour, we've gone over, which I usually do, you know that. So what haven't we covered that you want to make sure that you leave the Adulting is Easy listeners with?
Well, there's two things. Before I answer that, I want to make sure they know who you are and how to
Oh,
find
okay.
you. So can
Okay.
you do that while I think about an
Sure,
answer to that
sure.
question?
So, who I am, my name, as you said at the beginning, is Clint Murphy. I host a podcast called The Growth Guide, and I write a newsletter also called The Growth Guide. The idea is helping people become better, achieve more, and reach financial freedom during the day as my day job. I don't have a job anymore, so I've started a real estate development business with three partners. We have project under construction, a few in development. We have a number in due diligence. So we're trying to scale that business over the next, let's say 20 years. I imagine, Lauren, somewhere in the next 10, I probably start to, for me, by about 55, I want to be similar to what you said about Eric. Either there's an ability to monetize, or there's, hey, I moved from being an active manager and leader to an active shareholder and diminish the day to day. I'd love to still be able to go into the office here and there during the summer months, and then I'd love to spend 6 months a year in like Portugal. So that's who I am. The number one place a lot of people find me is Twitter, which is, I believe, I am Clint Murphy, and then LinkedIn, I think, might have or is just about to cross 100,000. So that's an interesting
Wow.
place. So I'll pass it back to you now that you've had some time to think about that.
Thank you. And as I reflect on our conversation today, which I knew it would go long, I expected nothing less of us. I want everybody to understand that we just covered, I mean, literally from like the 90s to 2025, basically.
Yeah.
But the big chunk of the growth and hard work was about 10 years. And I know that 10 years seems like a long time, but when you put your head down, when you're focusing, when you're having fun with it, when you're laying on the floor of one of your rentals covered in water because one of your plumbers used the wrong glue for the pipes and you can laugh about it. And when something comes up and you have a squatter and you just know you can figure it out and you just start rolling with it all and you become more confident, you become more resilient, you pick your head back up, and it has been that 10 to 15 years that you needed to get from point A to point B and reach a lot of your goals and maybe even go further than any of your goals ever were, further than you ever possibly imagined.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to leave people with is time goes fast, but also it might seem slow, but it's going to speed up. And if you just put your head down, get working, you'll lift your head up and you will accomplish what you wanted to.
Yes. That's such a great spot to leave people with. Lauren, I uh, had a lot of fun talking to you today and look forward to sharing this with people when you publish.